just paint it on. Use a big, one of those big bristle brushes, disposable ones, and just slop it on.
Sweet.
And do multiple
You've done
coats.
this.
Well, no, I've been thinking about doing this for about the past 17 years.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. I'm joined by Associate Editor Matt Milham.
What's up?
Digital Brand Manager Rob Watzak.
Hi.
Hey. And our stand-in producer Carrie is here today. You guys can email us your questions at fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast.
So,
Long pause.
at least he was breathing that time so we could hear him. So before you jump in, I think, is this our last podcast before
The Builder
IBS?
Show,
Before
yes.
International
I'm trying not to
Builders
say
Show?
IBS.
International Builders Show in Las Vegas from February 19th to the 21st, and we'll be there.
Yeah.
We'd love to see if you're going to be in the neighborhood.
This will be your first time there, right?
This will be my first time to Vegas and to the Builders Show, yes.
Man, you are in for a treat.
No.
And you're not going on this little voyage, huh?
It doesn't seem like it. Although it looks like the thing that I was supposed to shoot may happen the week after that. So
So you may be obligated to go.
I may be obligated to go now.
That's pretty fun. I love it.
Yeah, I've been the last 3 years, and it's good. There's just it doesn't. Sometimes it seems like there's not enough new stuff.
Yeah.
But sometimes there is.
Right.
Last year was pretty good. I saw a decent amount of new stuff. But.
Yeah, but you can't have possibly seen all the new stuff last year from how big I hear it is.
No, probably not. I mean, I think my little fitness tracker said I think I walked 18 miles in the 2.5 days or whatever it ran.
Man, I'm going to have to monitor that.
You know, on the iPhone, it's got the little built-in app that tells you that
that's
stuff.
what I was going by.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just the phone.
Mm-hmm.
So you clued me into something pretty interesting. Was it New York Post?
Something like that. I can't remember.
No, it was Washington Post.
Yeah, Washington Post. Yeah.
That said pretty much what?
That cleaning your ducts is a waste of time. Complete waste of time.
It doesn't do anything.
It doesn't do anything. It costs you money, and there's
It helps support the local economy.
Yeah, it helps support the local economy, but it doesn't really do anything to improve either the efficiency or the efficiency of the system or the cleanliness of your air.
Or your air quality, yeah.
So
I would say I believe that, except for like dryer vents, right? That seems like that would actually be important to keep that clean of lint.
So it doesn't catch on fire.
Right, because that does happen.
Right, yeah. And
But we're not talking about
We're not
that.
talking about,
We're talking
dryer
about
ducts.
a company that comes in with a vacuum and takes your registers off or seals them up. And
or a fluffy dog and just like runs it down the,
Well,
the ducts.
you look inside one of those old ducts and you see that stuff nice and plastered, almost like a nice fine velvet, right?
Yeah.
On the inside of the ductwork there.
a comfy blanket.
And if you really think about it, I mean, it's stuck on there pretty good usually, and it probably actually catches some of the dust that's passing by, right?
Right.
Yeah, there's probably some of that. And they also said that in some cases, the cleaning leads to dirtier air, at least in the
Short term.
and then it just goes back to the previous levels of dust that you had in your house. So,
Now, I'm sure there are some caveats here, right? I mean, I was in a remodeling job one time where they jackhammered up like 1,000 square feet of tile, and the ducts were pretty filthy after that. So,
So what do you do?
well, I mean, they hired a professional service. I think it cost like $1,500. But I mean, this was a big, intricate, modern house with lots of ducts. But also, I wonder if you've got a wood stove or something else that's causing a lot more nasty stuff to get into the ductwork than just the average dust. There's probably
Eczema.
some. Yeah.
Did you say eczema?
yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking like if you had a rodent infestation, like you'd want to clean the ductwork of poop and pee, right? But
Yeah.
I don't know that even works on that kind of stuff.
I don't know. I don't even want to think about it. That's why I got a boiler.
So obviously this is one article, one person's perspective on the. They did cite some data though. Is that in that article in the Post that you were reading, or?
Yeah.
There's some kind of data.
But so maybe we need some people to chime in on this. So send us some emails.
So if you have a duct cleaning business, love to hear from you. And if you've had this done, think it makes a difference.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear from you too.
Yeah, because we certainly don't want to go on one newspaper article and say that's the rule.
Not just one trusted source.
And you now have had your solar panels up for weeks.
A while, yeah. And so I can tell you day to day that I average somewhere, depending, because we've had some cloudy days and some sunny days.
We got some data here, right?
Yeah. So anyway.
So what is this thing?
Let me just, so first off, I'll say that before I even got the solar installed on my house, the solar PV 10K, system on my roof, I had this device that I'd actually found on my own a couple of years ago when I was just freelance writing product reviews for Fine Homebuilding.
So for those of you out there listening, this is a little red box that's next to Rob's service panel, his electrical panel.
Yeah, it's a little
and it's got a wire on it that I presume talks to your router.
So yeah, it's a little orange box actually, Patrick. But anyway, it's Sense. If you go to sense.com, like like Sense, like the five senses. This device, there have been energy monitor systems around forever. Back when I was working at Green Building Advisor, there's another one that I always really was fascinated by called the Web Energy Logger, which is basically just a modem data logger that you can hook up all kinds of sensors, heat sensors, current sensors.
Is this like that too, or is this just for electricity?
So this is just for electricity, but what it is they realized, this company Sense realized that there's enough data out there on the power signatures of the various appliances in people's houses that if you crowdsource that data, you can get more and more accurate delineation of which items are actually turning on and off at which times.
And why do people care? I think that's a good question.
So, one of the devices that popped up for a similar reason back in the early days of Green Building Advisor was these smart plugs that you could, I think it was called a kilowatt. It's like a plug that you can plug an appliance into.
To see how much energy it uses.
To see how much energy it uses, to see if that's where all your power is going on your electric bill. Because, if you got old appliances in your house, if you got a lot of, there's so many different systems that work depending on the weather or depending on your usage.
So people install these things to know if they're wasting energy.
To try to identify the big energy hogs in your house and see if you can actually change your behavior or even replace certain devices to get reduction in your energy consumption. So the Sense thing, it's kind of neat the way it works. It starts out just reading basically how much power the whole house is using, because all it does is have two, they call them CTs. I forget what that is an abbreviation for, current transit, I don't know, whatever. It's a current meter that clips around the main leads in your circuit panel. And it hooks up to your Wi-Fi, so it can give you an ongoing real-time feed of how much power is going into your house. And it over time starts scanning for power signatures as appliances come on and off, and it'll send you a little notification saying, hey, I think I found your water heater. Hey, I think you found your microwave oven. And, certain devices.
I was looking for that.
It'll sort of automatically say it's your water heater, and you can go in and correct it or adjust it or even put
Well, how would you know if it was your water heater?
Well, a water heater, things like water heater are a little harder because it's not like your microwave where you can turn it on or off. Like, that's what happened when I first got the notification from my microwave. I just turned it on, and sure enough, it says, hey, your microwave just turned back on.
Okay.
And you can then confirm that to make it more accurate, and you can even put in the model number so that it then has more accurate data to help everybody who's using these systems identify their appliances. Water heater is pretty easy because
it's like 3,000 watts.
Yeah, and not only that, but if you look at the graph, I'll put it on the website later. If you look at the graph that I have, it's a real-time graph, and it has the date, and you can see this huge spike, 3 huge spikes in the morning when my wife, and my daughter take our showers.
You know this, but Who cares?
Well, yeah, but the thing is, you can start to see, the patterns of when certain things go on. And I mean, I think part of me is just the nerdiness of wanting to know these details. But part of me is that, well, now I know how much of what percentage of my power consumption is based on my hot water heater, so that I can then, say, well, maybe it actually would pay off. I can do the math a little bit easier on saying, you know what, this is 1/3 of my electric bill, and that's going to save if I get a heat water recovery device, or if I get a
heat pump
water heater. And I went on GBA and actually kind of posed this question, and the heat pump water heater seemed like, to most of the smart guys over there, Green Building Advisor Forum, that the heat pump water heater was the first solution. But really, the first solution would be to just get a lower flow shower head than the one that I have. Which
the family will love that.
Yeah.
Well, I actually researched and found this company, Bricor, which actually produces supposedly shower heads for Navy ships, because they have to really be concerned about water consumption when they're out on the ships. And people claim that these things are even though they're low flow, the technology makes them not feel like some of the cheaper low flow.
You gonna try one?
I actually ordered it, so as soon as I get that thing running, I'll let you guys know if my wife and daughter make me replace it with the old one.
I'm betting on that.
Does this thing identify like standby power stuff? Like, because your TV is probably drawing
so
a
if
little
you
bit
go
of
back
power.
to that weird graph with the 3 circles on it, Carrie, that shows. See, it says always on. It basically identifies like your TV and all those other things that have like that phantom load when they're just sort of hovering in their semi off position. So
and it can pick up which one is which. Or
it can. I mean, it's certain appliances like my mini splits. And they admit this. It has a much harder time because there's so many components. There's compressors,
right,
and fans, and they're variable speed fans. So it's not like it's turning
on
and off.
The demands are very different.
So
moment to moment,
there are going to be some devices that, but then again, those things will have pretty sizable power loads. So you'll start to see when they come on and off. Like if you look back at the graph, the hourly graph. You'll see these very even little spikes, and that's a cycling of my heating system. And so
this is fascinating.
So they heard me. They actually heard
to some people.
So the people from Sense actually heard my podcasts, my mention of this on one of the earliest podcasts, that I had this device when I was getting the solar
Gave
installed,
$100.
and they told me that
Talk about it some more, Rob.
Yeah,
Keep sending you stuff.
They heard that I was getting solar installed, and they're like, "Hey, we've got this other plug that you can plug into your solar to measure that." And so if you look at the graph that I've got, the light orange color, which is that's the solar production, and then the darker orange color is the consumption of all my appliances. And so the goal is always to, I guess, keep all the darker color underwater, under.
So if you look at the little circles, it would indicate that you're making about as much power as you're using.
So now this is one particularly sunny day when it wasn't super cold. So throughout this past several weeks, I've been noticing some days I'll make, a tiny amount of solar and I'll be using a ton of power. And then some days I'll be producing, I was surprised this time of year, producing just about all the power I used for the day on some of the warmer winter days when it's really sunny. And as the solar angle gets higher,
you'll get more juice.
I should get more power, and I'll get longer days. So my goal is by the summer to be producing excess, and then I bank that. In Connecticut, we have net metering, and so I'll bank that as credits for next winter.
So do you go around the house and yell at your family members to stop using electricity with the hope that you can generate enough that they're not wasting it?
I've given up on that a long time ago. Although, what I did do is in the laundry room, I installed a motion sensor switch that goes off after 1 minute.
Oh,
so
yeah, I bet that's awesome.
They actually like it because
I bet they do.
Yeah, it just kind of fades on and off. It's like one of these Lutron switches, and it's I don't know. I like it.
I always like how they turn off when you're in the middle of sitting still.
Right.
Yeah, that's the best.
Yep. Oh, but one more chart I wanted to show you guys.
Please.
That's the chart that comes with the solar system that I own. The PV company monitors my panels to make sure there's nothing wrong. But that is a cellular signal, and to save, they obviously can't have a real-time cellular signal for free from my house. So twice a day it sends a little blip and sends the current data up to that point. So the nice thing about the Sense app is I get real-time data instead of just sort of this like aggregate for the day that the company that provided the solar gave me.
Does the Sense thing tell you how much power it's drawing?
I don't know.
Of course not. I'll have to look into that. That's like 800 watts.
Yeah.
No, I'm sure it's...
Well, that is really interesting, Rob.
It's been fun. I've actually been really impressed with how it's been working out. It's made investing the thousands of dollars into these solar panels feel a little bit better.
Well, you got to imagine that the solar companies want to make you feel good about your purchase, right? So this is the way to do it, right? To show you this is your money. This is what you're getting from your $20,000 investment.
Yep.
So we heard from two listeners who heard us discuss our discussion about preventing mold and algae on roofs and siding, and you heard from Mike Gerton, right?
Yeah, Mike Gerton wrote to me. He was like, I use the wet and forget stuff all the time. He uses it on his rental houses, I guess. And he says it works. He says, don't expect it to work immediately. He said it really is spray and forget. Like you put it on and then within a week or two, whatever mold or mildew is gone. He's used it on his mother's house in Florida. She has, I guess, some sort of white tile or something like that around a pool or a patio. Mm-hmm. And he said it was pretty much black with mold, and he sprayed that stuff on and it was back white again in a few weeks.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
It has to make you wonder, like, what is it?
Yeah, I don't know. But he said it's one of the few sort of like what is now a box store item that he
or
actually...
Or like a miracle product.
that he would actually use and swear by.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, my wife's going to be happy to hear about that.
I'm going to try this.
She's been bugging me for forever to get the north side of my house to stop growing mold. So
it looks really bad. My barn, one side of it, the front side faces north, and it looks terrible on the gable end because it doesn't get washed off because of the overhang. It's nasty. So I'm going to go up there and spray that all over it. Andrew from Dallas wanted to weigh in on our discussion of why contractors get such a bad rap in episode 146. This was a discussion of a lady whose contractor wouldn't finish her shed, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And he suggested filing a complaint in small claims court. He used the process for a problem with a patio door. He wrote, we did a $500,000 remodel / pool house construction project for a client. Geldwin provided the back door system, which I later found out was one of the first units they had made of that new line. That never starts good, does it? Long story short, they forgot to install the weather stripping on the bottom of the operable and fixed door panels. After the first rain, the oak hardwood floor buckled. Gosh, It cost $8,000 to make all the repairs necessary from the water leak, and Geldwin refused to pay. I decided to file a small claims suit against them without an attorney. It was new territory for me, but not difficult to navigate. I filed the suit in Dallas, since that's where I'm located. I had a local sheriff serve them papers where they're headquartered. The court issued a pre-trial date to meet at the courthouse in front of the judge. Their lawyer was there, and we went up to the judge and basically laid out a Cliff's Notes version of our cases. The judge essentially said, looks pretty straightforward to me. Geldwin ended up cutting me a check for the balance and even a little over for the inconvenience because they knew they would lose a court case. One of the nice things about small claims court is that if the other party doesn't show up after being served papers, then you win the case and can take legal action to recoup the money you're owed.
Yeah, that's one way to do it. There's a limit. I don't know what the limits are. I think
You mean
it probably
dollar
varies by
amount?
state.
Yeah.
What qualifies as small claims, but yeah.
meaning if it's above a certain amount, you've got to go to regular civil court.
I think so, yeah.
But,
I love that Geldwin had to pay to fix the floor that they damaged.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a good example of the squeaky wheel gets the grease. It's like
They hope
so
you'll
many,
go away.
Yeah, so many big businesses. Not to knock the big businesses. I mean, they're just going about their business. But if you just like when you call customer service, usually a lot of times the first time around you get somebody like blowing you off. But if you're persistent, you usually get what you need to get done.
I love calling the cable company for service interruptions. That's my favorite thing. when I'm trying to like raise my blood pressure. I hope for a cable outage. Our first question today is from Aaron and Sandy from my hometown of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Greetings, gentlemen. I've recently found your podcast and I love it. I'm binging through old episodes, but in the interim, I have a question about my basement. My wife and I are restoring a 130-year-old Victorian townhouse in Pittsburgh's historic Allegheny West neighborhood. This is on Pittsburgh's north side. The house is generally in great shape, and I think we can get another century or two out of it with proper maintenance. One project we'd like to tackle is making the basement more useful and comfortable. We have no intention of making it a living space or in the now or in the future, but a small workshop and additional storage would be great. I plan to insulate the rim joist per your October 2313 article. We'll put that up on the podcast because I'm not even sure what that is. And I should also mention that we have no water issues, a small miracle for Pittsburgh. That's something I would attest to. The big project is going to be the walls. We have a stone foundation with what we believe to be lime mortar. The walls easily shed dust and debris when touched, and to complicate matters, it seems sections of the walls have been painted, sealed, encapsulated in the past. The black stuff on the upper half of the walls in some pictures. We've read that old foundations need to breathe, and sealing the walls will be bad for the long-term stability of the foundation. We've also read that lime washing could be a viable solution.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they ask, is there some amount of disintegration normal for old stone foundations, or should we be concerned about a larger issue? No, that's just what happens, right?
Yep.
Will lime washing reduce interior foundation degradation, or will it merely brighten the space?
It could do both.
Yeah.
If it's done right and the moisture conditions are not bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can't hurt.
No, I mean
it can't hurt
I'll
at all.
get into that in a minute once you get done with the questions.
All right.
Wrap it up.
If we lime wash, do you recommend a product and/or procedure? And 5, are there any general tips or tricks for making old basements more useful, less dusty/dirty?
Yeah.
Best regards from the Steel City.
And he also asked, should they chisel out some of the mortar first and repoint?
Do you want to answer that? Rob's mad at me. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it really doesn't. It's hard to tell just from looking at the pictures, but it doesn't look like any of the mortar's really falling out.
I think
it
that stone
actually
wall's in
looks
great shape.
It looks like it's in great shape. I mean, the first thing I would do is definitely take that parge coat off, whatever's on there.
Because nothing is going to stick to that loose material.
Yeah, nothing's going to stick to that. And if that's spalling off, the chances are that that's actually preventing sort of like normal water moisture migration through that wall.
Yeah.
And
it's a vapor retarder, right?
And they probably use something they shouldn't have been using, like some Portland-based product or something like that. Because 100% chance with the age of that house that is lime mortar between those.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. And in most places, it looked like it was limestone stones. In that
There's a lot of that
foundation,
around Pittsburgh. It could also be fieldstone, sandstone.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of alluvial material in Pittsburgh.
Okay. But if it really probably doesn't matter what it is. But yeah, the lime wash, I think, is a great idea. Just make sure that you get all of the grit, take all that stuff off, all that parge coat, clean.
This is going to be
the wall,
awesomely fun, right?
Yeah, get all the grit off. Wear a
respirator.
dust mask, while you're doing that. Maybe wet it down a little bit while you're doing that to kind of kill some of the dust. And then, you can just mix up your own lime wash with just some...
How do we make a lime wash, Matt?
What I've done is just Mason's lime and water, and you just mix it.
And no sand?
No sand.
Interesting.
Yeah, just straight up, and then you just paint it on. Use a big, one of those big bristle brushes, disposable ones, and just slop it on.
Sweet.
You've
done this?
Well, no. I've been thinking about doing this for about the past 17 years since I bought my house.
Y'all can tell in Pittsburgh that this was a big priority for Rob.
No, but this has come up a lot. I mean, it's funny because I spent years in my early years in my house, like trying to find answers to this same question, and I've sort of, found good ones over the years, but I'm glad it came up again because I surprisingly, like, instantly searched and found some pretty good solutions. First of all, there's this company called U.S. Heritage. It's usheritage.com, and they produce all sorts of stuff for old stone and masonry repair.
What's it called again?
It's usheritage.com, and they have a whole bunch of assortments of dry plasters or washes that are a recipe that they put together with the old traditional ingredients that you can just add water. I saw a bucket. I'm not sure if the bucket version was a wet one that like it's ready to go, but I think you always want it to be mixed right before you're going to use it, right? So
Yeah, you don't want it to dry out.
Yeah.
So like if you're buying bagged lime for this, like if you're buying bagged Mason's lime, get the freshest bags you can. And
Do they have a date on them, Matt? How do you know?
They may have a production date on it, but yeah.
Can you taste it to know if it's fresh?
Well, if it feels that if any of the stuff in the bag is hardened, then you know it's been laying around.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's, you don't want that because that's the chemical reaction that's making it actually work, correct?
Yeah, the carbonation.
It's hydration or carbonation?
Carbonization or carbonation. It's not carbonation, but it's, carbonizing. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I was kidding. Do not eat the lime, please.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't get it in your eyes.
But so these folks, they have they had some good information and a bunch of different products. They even had some like jute or some other natural fiber reinforcing material that they would use in the plaster on some of these old walls.
And below grade, like masonry like this?
I believe so, yeah.
Wow.
In fact, sometimes I think they used to use like horsehair and other things like that in the plaster.
Yeah, because it doesn't have any tensile strength, so they would put some kind of fiber. That's when they're doing plaster. But if you're doing just a lime wash, then it's basically just water and lime.
And
And
these,
you can add color to it if you wanted to. There's
Like
all
what?
Some kind of like rust, like iron-based pigments, or there's all kinds of like natural pigments that you can add to add some color.
kind of like the same way milk paint used to be colored, probably. Right? But now the thing is, so they have the traditional mixes of plasters and washes, but then they commented on what you were pointing out, Matt, is that if there's any of these newer, Portland or acrylic finishes or any kind of thing that's not a lime compatible finish like the old stone or the old mortar, that it won't stick to it. But then they had like an acrylic fortified binder that you could actually put on if you had places where you just couldn't get some of that old stuff off. So it seemed like a pretty good resource. And then I also found some other place. It was earthpigments.com that had I'll put a link for that. They had a really awesome article that just talked about all the concerns in getting it to be, getting something like this to stick and preparing the surfaces and the compatibility of the different materials. So I'm kind of glad this question came up again because it's helpful for me. But also, I last time we had someone asking about this, I didn't quite do all the research and get the to the core of the answer.
I wasn't going to remind you of that.
No, thanks.
But yeah, that should cut down any of that.
On the dust, especially.
Yeah, and the degradation.
Sandy nastiness.
Yeah, because that lime wash is going to stick to the lime mortar. It basically is the same exact thing. It's going to become part of it, essentially.
I think you guys should seek out one of the older residents of the north side with some masonry heritage, because there's a large collection of the previous generation of Pittsburghers who were Masons. So, especially in the Italian neighborhoods. Get some help.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Because I think it's going to be messy.
well, that's what I was going to say. You might, putting the lime wash on is really not much more than painting. Otherwise, you have to, other than the fact that you have to be careful because it's a caustic material. So you have to wear, you should wear safety goggles and clothes you don't mind getting stuff on. But I mean, it's just like exposure to cement. You can get burns from exposure to lime wash.
Yeah, but I would say on the scale that they're going to be doing, wear gloves if you want to be safe.
And eye protection, too.
And definitely eye protection. That's really important. And
Lime
have
in your
like
eyes,
an eye
bad.
wash station.
Yeah.
You can get some, like little bottles of stuff to squirt in your eyes in case you get it in your eyes, but wear goggles. But yeah, I've done quite a bit of lime washing with no gloves. It dries out your hands a little bit, but it doesn't really burn. It depends on what you're using. If you're using quicklime, which has not been slaked at all, that will burn you pretty good, pretty fast. But if you're using a hydrated lime or a hydraulic lime, I probably wouldn't recommend hydraulic lime, but if you're using a hydrated lime, then it's already, most of that process, that chemical reaction has already happened.
Dig it.
Yeah.
And one thing to answer their question about will this help with the disintegration, one of the reasons why lime plasters or even lime washes were put on old masonry walls like this is they were a sacrificial coating. They were intended to start crumbling over time because of the pressure from the from the capillary action of the
The
moisture.
older Pittsburghers I was talking about, it would have been an annual ritual to paint the foundation of your house in some of these neighborhoods. You would see, like, they'd paint the cyclone fence on their tiny lot with silver paint, and then they'd paint the foundation with a lime wash every year.
Yeah. And then I think the lime wash will fill in all those little cracks and stuff.
Yeah.
And because lime is somewhat self-healing, because that carbonization or carbonation, whatever you call it, sort of happens over a very long period of time. And so lime has sort of like the ability to self-heal. There's always a little bit of that left.
Just don't use Portland cement.
Yeah. Don't use Portland.
And theoretically, it has the ability to inhibit mold growth too, because it's a caustic surface, and so it can actually help make the air a little bit nicer down in the basement too if it's a little damp down there.
Yeah, it'll prevent mold growth.
Question 2 comes from Heather in New Jersey. Hi, guys. I'm an architect and my husband is a mechanical engineer. What do you think they argue about?
Everything.
I've been reading your magazine and listening to your podcast for years. I've been using your articles as resources in designing the new home we're building for ourselves. In the early stages of design, I made a spreadsheet with different wall assemblies and calculated their cost per R value. I concluded that the most bang for the buck was R21 fiberglass bats and 1.5 inches of continuous rigid insulation on the exterior. So that must be a 2x6 wall, right? We've also decided to continue this rigid down to the foundation wall so that everything would be flush. Fast forward to a year later, our foundation is almost finished and we're about to start framing. We're working on putting our window and door order together. We're right at the point in my project when you start asking yourself, are you sure you thought all this through? Do you think that's the husband or the wife asking that? So being that my husband is a mechanical engineer and has already modeled this house in an energy modeling software, we tried running the calculations without the 1.5 inches of rigid insulation on the exterior of the house. A 3.5% difference is what it is. We're thinking we're building the super insulated house and we're only doing 3.5% better than if we just built the house to code. After all my research on the best way to flash Audi windows and put a drainage plane behind rigid insulation, I'm left wondering if it's worth the extra cost, about $5,000 in material, labor time, and complicated details for 3.5% of energy savings. The tables below show how the transmission through the walls goes up about 33% when you remove the rigid foam, but in the bigger picture, it's a drop in the bucket next to the roof, windows, and doors. We're using Andersen windows with Low E Smart Sun Glass, which is about as good as you can get without going triple glazed. Our roof is R49, where there's an attic, and R30 and the slope ceilings. So many of your projects in the magazine use rigid foam or mineral wool on the exterior, but the numbers just don't seem to make sense. Is there something I'm missing? What would you do? What would you do?
I don't think she's missing anything. I mean, there's just... One, they're in a climate zone where there's just not a huge temperature difference. So there's just not a ton of energy going through these walls to begin with. So a 33% difference when you remove the rigid for like how much transmission there is through that wall.
It seems like BTUs.
But you're dealing with a low number of BTUs to begin with. Because, I ran the numbers through a little thing too. And without the foam, they're looking at about a 16.548 R value.
Okay.
But that's not
whole wall.
That's whole wall, not counting. I didn't count windows. I didn't count doors. That's just the assembly that they're talking about without the foam. You add 1.5 inches of EPS and it immediately jumps to 23.032. And if you go with polyiso, it's a little over 27. So the R values jump
a lot,
quite a bit, but it's a wall. It's not a roof. So there's just not that much energy transferring through the wall in climate zone 4, I guess.
I think that's the nut there.
Yeah.
There's just not enough delta T to make that foam matter much. The windows, as she suggests, and the roof are where you have most of your heat loss, so that's going to be bigger.
Yeah.
Yep.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, the thing is, they seem like they're really doing their homework, so that makes me think that they're going to do really good air sealing details on the house. And the one benefit that a lot of rigid foam sheathing has on the one of the big benefits it has on the outside of a house is it acts as an air barrier if it's taped properly. And usually fiberglass is not, as you were talking about, performing up to its rated R value. And just having that additional layer as a really well-detailed air barrier just makes the fiberglass actually perform better than it would have in an empty wall that wasn't sealed as well.
I think there are good reasons for putting exterior insulation on homes besides the minimal savings in BTU loss. Keeps your sheathing warmer, keeps your framing warmer, prevents ghosting of studs and headers and stuff, which is the result of condensation because the framing members are actually colder than the rest of the wall. So because of that, dust sticks to it, and it eventually shows up at these patterns of every single one of your pieces of lumber behind the drywall. So,
Yeah.
Is it that big a deal in New Jersey? No, it's not. That's much more problem in further northern climates in the U.S.
Yes, I mean the foam is going to add to durability, and because
it?
I mean the potential for moisture damage inside the walls if it's detailed properly. So I mean. Nowadays, maybe I'm just buying into everything that I hear, but I mean, it just seems like it's a smart thing to do unless you.
So she asked her last thing. What would you do, Rob?
I would keep going with the foam. I mean, it seems like the R value that they're shooting for is a reasonable thing, even if they think that the payback doesn't make sense for the small amount of gain. It just seems like it's the right thing to do for even you're thinking about like when you have power outages, getting through the colder.
That's exactly what I was thinking of. That's why
So
I
you
would
do it too?
I think I would do it mostly because of the possibility of power outages and stuff like that. Because
In
in
New
the
Jersey?
winter, I don't know. I mean, think about how cold it is out right now.
This is
I woke
weird,
up,
but it does happen.
Yeah, it was minus 5.6 at my house this morning.
And the
according to my
power goes
thermometer.
out during storms, right? Let's be honest about
Yeah.
that. So it's a concern.
Yeah. And it'll definitely help in that. I don't know if you want to call it resiliency, but you'll keep your house warmer longer with that.
She wants to put the WRB behind the foam, which I don't quite understand. I would just keep it on the outside of the foam layer, and it's such an easier assembly than trying to detail behind it.
Well, I think if you do it behind it, then you don't need to tape all the foam.
What's the problem with the tape?
I don't know. It's just just less things to tape. I don't know.
But you got to tape something.
You only need to tape one layer.
Yeah, you got to tape something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it done both ways. I think getting your WRB inboard as far as possible is not a bad idea.
Why do you want the water behind the foam?
Well, I mean, honestly, I probably would do both. I would probably tape the seams on the foam too.
She's looking for an easier assembly, Rob.
I just think attaching
Hey, if you're going
the
to invest,
WRB
if you're going to
is-
invest this much money in a house that's custom built, I mean, another thing about putting the foam on the outside, back to that, is just think about like so many people think about the bottom line, the return on investment, but comfort is really one of the biggest things that people want in a house. And I mean, if you have colder wall surfaces, even if the air temperature in the house is higher, I know I can walk into certain rooms of my house, and because those walls are not well insulated, even with my pellet stove cranking,
Yeah, they're
I feel
radiating
colder
cold.
because
Yeah.
that wall is radiating. So I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons to do things the way that they were originally planning on.
I'm less convinced.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, New Jersey's pretty warm.
Yeah.
But I mean, foam on the exterior helps in cooling too. So
Yeah. Do what you want.
we're not any help
Whatever
in this
feels
one.
good.
That's like
Whatever feels
Well,
right.
at least we're giving some reasons for our differences in opinion here.
I've always said I would build my house the way she describes, right? With 2x6 walls, bad insulation, and foam, just because it's a easy, relatively robust assembly, right? It's hard to mess that up. Doors and windows can have jambs that match that wall thickness. It's not hard to do.
Yep.
But like if you're in a warm place, you gotta ask, is it worth it?
Yeah.
Now, what do you think about the fact that we're seeing more of the high-performance home builders moving to mineral wool as opposed to exterior rigid foam?
You mean mineral wool on the exterior?
Yeah, the semi-rigid or rigid mineral wool panels. Like
I think that's
comfort
great.
board.
There's a lot to dislike about foam with regard to how it's made and its global warming potential, especially XPS, EPS less so, and polyiso is the most benign. But mineral wool is very labor intensive too, right? Or energy intensive rather, and labor intensive to put on. So it solves some problems, but I think there are others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of Gutex. That like
That's
the
like
fiber
wood
one.
fiber, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that instead of mineral wool?
I haven't really seen that stuff in use. I really
It seems
can't
like termites would love it.
I don't know. I mean, it's got to be borate treated or something. I mean, all that stuff is.
Mineral wool?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if mineral wool is because nobody's eating that.
But the wood, the
but
wood
anything
fiber
that
stuff.
that's going to get eaten or whatever, burned.
What about anybody hear anything? I haven't heard anything in a while about those people who are trying to grow the mushroom insulation.
That's still a thing. Yeah. I think that has a lot of promise.
Yeah.
I'm going to grow my own. All right. This is from Tom from Highland, Michigan. Longtime listener, first-time emailer. I noticed a bit of water on the floor of my unfinished basement last night. Looked up and noticed ice on the end of one of the return air trunk lines for the furnace feeding from the second floor. The 6-inch duct leading to the end of this trunk was also very cold and had ice on it. There's another duct 2 bays over, similarly cold. It took me a little bit to figure out that these ducts come from the outside. I climbed up the exterior vents in the snowy darkness, and I could see there was a damper in there, but there does not seem to be a lever to control it, so I beveled a piece of 2-inch foam and jammed it in there to stop the outside air from coming in. Also, looking from the inside, the holes were hacked into the place with big beveled cuts like there was a total hack afterthought. Thankfully, the ice has melted from the duct, and I swear the upstairs bedroom that it has its return air hooked to this trunk seems warmer now. So why was this done in the first place? Have you ever heard of this? I plan on sealing it all, but it's too damn cold to do much with it right now. Was this someone's idea for makeup air? Why would you need 2 6-inch ducts? My theory is maybe the exterior vents were for combustion air of the 2 furnaces, but they hooked them up super wrong and no one noticed. We purchased the house this summer, and so this was our first winter. It was built in 2003 and seems to be well done. It was a custom home, and the workmanship looks very good. Well, it did. There's a wood fireplace, which we do not use on the main floor, and the sealed gas insert on the second floor. Sorry for the long email, but I wanted to make sure you had all the info. Check out the attached pictures as well. Oh boy, I love a mystery. I know exactly why they did this, or I think I do.
Go ahead.
So my guess is that the ductwork was undersized and was sucking combustion air because of that from the furnace and causing a backdraft. And I think as a cheap fix, and the secret is here, when he says the cuts were hacked like an afterthought, and I think it was. I think they had combustion problems because there was too much air being sucked through the undersized return air ducting, and it was causing backdrafting of their gas furnace. Now, I don't know if he has sealed combustion furnaces. Given the age of the house, it could be atmospheric venting or pressurized venting, direct vent, as we say. So I think you better unplug those holes. And of course, that air which is coming from the outside is going to make the furnace blow cooler air, of course, right? It has a temperature rise, assuming a temperature coming from the house, not the outdoors.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
I don't think it's totally unusual for people to have constructed it in this way. I think, from what I've read anyway, this was a pretty common practice to have these lines sort of like feed into the return and, provide
fresh
air into the system. And in some cases, it seems like people were also thinking that this was providing combustion air, which in a sense it is. But the code doesn't really.
It's interesting. So it's not providing combustion air.
Well,
right?
in a roundabout
way it is because it's sucking in more air and it is pressurizing the house. So in a roundabout way it is.
It's not taking the shortest path to the furnace.
Yeah.
It's just providing more air so the
right.
Yeah, furnace has some air to burn.
So what do you think? Do you think he could just then hook that up as the combustion air like he was assuming?
I think he needs a good HVAC technician to come and check this out because there are some very dangerous things that could be going on when if your combustion appliances are backdrafting, right? You're putting carbon monoxide in your house. And right now, if you don't have one, get a carbon monoxide detector to make sure that you're not creating problems for yourself.
Yeah, because the tighter the house, the bigger problems you're causing by closing off those ducts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this time of year, especially when the thing is cranking and it's cold outside, and you want to be. I mean, this is when it's like these super cold times are when people end up killing themselves with carbon monoxide because there's so much more of it in their house. And
sure,
it's all closed up.
I have a short anecdote. So I did some air sealing work in my attic. I was a big hole that was like 2 foot by 3 foot that went all the way to the basement, and it was, I think I told you guys last week, that was actually creating mold on the ceiling, right? Because the warm air from inside the house in the basement was going up and condensing on the cold sheathing, right? So when I sealed that up, I found that when I ran the range hood and the clothes dryer in our 700 square foot house, that then the furnace, old oil furnace, would start backdrafting. You could smell that like kerosene smell inside the house, which is terrible, right? So my solution was to cut a hole in the band joist that feeds into the return air plenum that provides additional air to prevent this from happening. And so this is a solution for a problem. And if you don't know what the original thing that was trying to be solved is, you could really be hurting yourself.
So what you're saying is you basically did the same thing.
I did the same thing on purpose, yes, to solve a backdrafting issue.
Yep. And you don't see any icing going on in yours?
Oh, it's freezing, and my heating bills went up amazingly.
Yeah.
So,
Why didn't you just feed that air directly into the space and let it just pull it out of the space rather than feed it into the return?
Because
For the listener,
because when you do that, you're supposed to have 2 holes if you feed it just into the space. If you put, I don't know why it's different, but there's other solutions that are going to save energy better than having the duct to the outside. There are things to induce draft. You could buy new heating equipment. You know, there's other ways to solve this, but I would want to know what's going on before I start plugging up holes.
I would think that if you just had the air sort of dumping into the space rather than putting it into the return, because the return is actually sucking that air in from the outside. So you're sort of like inducing more outside air to come into the space than than the
it's under
appliance
negative
actually,
pressure. Yes.
Than it actually requires. So I think at least the code would want you just to dump it into that space and allow it to get to the appliance, not feed it into the appliance via the return.
So because it's under negative pressure might answer why you only need 1 pipe if you're feeding it into the return air plenum versus atmospherically through you need 2 pipes.
Right.
So you break your Sawzall blade and said, I can't make another hole and I'll just stick with 1 for now?
Well, like as everyone's pointing out, it makes your house much colder, right? If you're trying to heat outdoor air, especially on a day like today when it's 0, right?
Yep.
So,
You know, I tell you, with my pellet stove, I've been trying to think about outdoor air source for, you know, there's a big debate about it on pellet stoves and wood stoves on whether it makes sense to have dedicated combustion air coming in through a vent or to just pull the air from the space. And I know there are certain...
It depends on how leaky your house is.
Yeah, I know there are certain... Like, my kitchen feels like there's basically an air conditioner duct underneath the kicks right now because I know that the walls are not taped before they put the cabinets up.
Why do people do that?
So I'm, like, thinking about replacing my countertops soon, and I'm like, when I do that, I'm just going to rip all these cabinets out and...
Take the drywall.
And refurbish them out in my shop where it'll be easier on a workbench and then put them back in. Even though it's going to be a lot more work, it's just like...
I was trying to... I was going around my kitchen 2 days ago with an infrared thermometer trying to find the air leak that blows across my feet when I'm standing in front of the sink. And
Did you find it?
I'm pretty sure it's behind a corner cabinet. And I think what happened is that there's probably a piece of missing drywall back there, and someone said, the cabinet's going to be there. Who cares?
Yeah.
Probably.
If you put, you know, like in a corner cabinet, a manufactured corner cabinet, like it doesn't form a 90 at the very corner. It's got a 45 there, so like the corner doesn't have to be perfect, right? And if you put your hand underneath the thing, you can feel the cold air coming down from that little channel and behind the cabinet.
Yeah. I mean, I knocked out the little masonite panels in the back of my rotary corner cabinets and foamed back there, and when I redid the flooring in my kitchen, I actually pulled all the kicks off and like reached as far back as I could with a can of spray foam, but didn't get it all.
You know your daughter's going to grow up thinking this stuff is normal.
I hope so.
Our final question is from Brandon from Minnesota. Hi, guys. I've heard some conflicting information on shingle overhang at rakes and eaves and would love your take. I know this can vary depending on region and wind condition as well as the manufacturer's instructions. In Minnesota, where I am, I've heard recommendations as much as letting the shingles hang over the edge of the roof 1 or 2 inches, which seems extreme to me. I understand no overhang can be susceptible to capillary action as well. Thanks for your input. Who wants to go?
2 inches seems extreme to me, I would think.
Yeah, I've never seen that much.
Even 1
for
inch
someone
seems
who
extreme to
knew
me.
what they're doing.
I think like the industry recommendation is like 1/2 inch. Is it right? Or
Possibly.
Should we ask an industry representative?
well, I actually looked at. I can't remember which forum it was, but it was one of the roofing association forums or something like that. I'll try to find the link.
Well, I did actually ask a roofing industry
you
professional.
Did?
I
Wow.
did.
There you go.
So I contacted my buddy Diami Plotke of Roof Services in Deer Park, New York, on Long Island. And he says, and this is what I was going to tell you too, is you need drip edge, right? Use drip edge all the time. Some people cheap out. In my mind, that is one of the worst ways to save money on your building.
It's not that much more for good drip edge, even.
Yeah, and it takes like what 2 minutes to put a piece of drip edge on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it prevents like ladders from smashing your shingles when you push, lean a ladder up against your roof. Like, don't get me started on people who skip the drip edge. Diami says the drip edge prevents water infiltration and shingle blow off. Commercially available drip edge has a horizontal projection of between 1/4 and 3/4 before it returns and runs down the vertical face of the fascia. The starter shingles, which should be used on eaves and rake edges, should be installed with between a 1/4 and 3/4 inch overhang past the edge of the drip edge. So he's saying 1/2 inch. We aim for 1/2 inch of overhang beyond the drip edge. And then the first course of shingles and the shingles running up the rake should be installed so that they are even with or just slightly past the starter course.
Okay.
And the person asking the question, Brandon from Minnesota, right? Was like, oh, I heard about capillary action. Well, the thing is that drip edge has ridges on it, and that should
That's
work,
meant to
prevent that capillary action to some degree. And if you're really concerned, you can use an adhesive, like a roofing caulk.
And you probably should. There's a good reason to do that.
Yeah, there's all kinds of solutions. And Mike Girton just wrote about this in, issue 282, 9 upgrades to windproof your roof. And in high wind zones, he says he's following the Fortified Home program, which we've talked about mostly in relation to the hurricanes.
Yeah, but this is a program by the Insurance Institute, right?
Yeah.
And it's meant to stop
roof
insurance
problems.
losses.
Right, yeah. So they're trying to keep your shingles on the roof. And they're recommending no more than a 1/4 inch to no overhang for these things. And they recommend using either a self-adhesive starter or what Mike likes to use is sort of like a double-sided peel and stick, at least along the rakes.
Do we know what that product is called?
It was Protecto Wraps Roof Edge Seal, I believe it's called.
I've never seen that product. What a great idea.
And he uses a drip edge with a really long roof leg. It's like 5 or 6 inches, and he
Yes.
nails
So
that
that's
in a
something to
W
talk
pattern.
about. In the lumberyard where I worked, we had 5 and 8 inch drip edge, right? And in northern Vermont, it's typically galvanized steel, which is a little unusual. Most of the country seems to be aluminum. But with all the heavy ice and snow, a sturdier drip edge makes a lot of sense in that climate.
It probably also goes, a lot of people use the galvanized metal roofs up there. It probably goes better with that too, right?
Sure, but everybody used it on every roof, oddly. The aluminum stuff was never seen.
Yeah.
But the 5 and 8 inches refers not to the roof leg, as many people think it does. It actually refers to its overall length. So a 5-inch galvanized drip edge only has like a 3-inch roof leg, whereas the 8 inch has 5 inches and makes it out much tougher.
Yeah, that's like you said. It's not worth it to skimp on that stuff, especially in a cold climate where you've got ice damming and stuff like that. It's like the more coverage you've got,
I don't understand why people would omit drip edge, except just if you're just trying to sell someone a roof and get out of there.
But basically, the answer is that you want a very small overhang. The overhang is really provided by the drip edge, and you can go pretty much right up to the edge of that or a little bit over, and use the right adhesive materials, and it should be fine.
Yeah. I like when we have a definitive answer.
Yeah. Actually, I think one thing that Fortified Home says is that I left out. I'm not even sure if they recommend the self-adhesive thing. They may say just embed it in like roofing tar.
Right, the black stuff that comes in the caulking gun. Yeah. And they tell you to do that especially if you're shingling in the winter anyway, because the roof won't get hot enough to self-seal.
Right. You won't be able to activate that self-seal strip.
Yeah, in fact, is that even code required in the winter for an install? I mean, I know that you're supposed to, if it's below a certain temperature.
Well, so that's a good question, and so the code says that products must be installed by the manufacturer's instructions, and if you read the wrapper of a shingle package, in addition to the many good tips for roofing that are on there that no one ever reads, is the one to self-seal when you're expecting cold temperatures, especially roofs that are very steep in cold temperatures because they have less gravity working to make them stick together.
And I think, I mean, of course, it depends on the manufacturer's instructions, but I feel like it's like under 40 degrees or something like that, or maybe it's definitely warmer than you might think that you should be using the
Yeah, nobody wants to do it who's a professional roofer, but if you're shingling in cold weather, it is a very good idea.
Can you just torch it?
I thought you might be serious for a second. I was like, what should I say? Yeah, do it.
Yeah. How dumb are you?
Have you ever burned asphalt shingles?
No.
Don't.
Have you ever worked on a torch down roof before, though?
No.
I remember when I was a kid, my grandparents owned a building in Queens, New York. And it was one of these flat roof buildings, and their apartment was actually higher than the adjacent warehouse, and that was part of their building. And I remember as a little kid sitting watching my dad out the window with a torch, patching up this old warehouse roof with the torch down tar.
That's still another reason not to be a roofer, right?
Yeah. Accidental self-immolation.
I watched guys in Biloxi, Mississippi I'd never seen this before, but you can buy like chunks of asphalt, right? And they come in like a cardboard thing. And these guys were hacking these big chunks up with an axe and throwing them into this boiling kettle, right? And this is like 90 degrees in Biloxi, Mississippi with like 90% humidity. And they're doing this historic building with this hot mop roof. And not only was like the stuff like napalm, but it stunk so bad. I was like, gosh, how do you find someone to do this?
Yeah. Well, actually, one of my first jobs right outside of college, I was living back in my parents' house, and there was some kind of shifty guy who had a bunch of weird businesses. I think he was like a lawyer, but he had like owned a roofing.
Of course he was.
He owned a roofing business, and I was like looking for work, and I don't know why I even took this job because it was nothing like anything that I was interested in. But somebody was like, "Oh yeah, I know this guy who needs help," and we were doing roofs. Flat roofs with EPDM, and they make special cleaners that you're supposed to prepare the seams with before you put the adhesive down. No, he just used like a can of gasoline.
Yeah, heard about the gasoline steam prep. It's so much cheaper and easy to get.
Yep.
Oh man. Well, Diami, thank you for helping out here. Diami is also a passionate woodworker, and if you're into woodworking, you should check out Diami's podcast. Go to modernwoodworkersassociation.com and choose subscribe in the upper right-hand corner to get his podcast. So
He's got a whole association.
I'm not going to question Diami. And if you're in the New York metro area and need roofing, check out roofservices.com. That's their company.
Cool.
They do mostly commercial work, but they do some residentials for nice people. Well, do we have anything else?
Well, just going back to the Builders Show, we have a fundraising event there. Hopefully, by the time this podcast airs, we'll have all or most of the tickets sold to that. But it's a
Keepcraft Alive
fundraiser for Keepcraft Alive, which provides scholarship support for people who are interested in going into the trades. And we're at the what's it called? It's at the Hard Rock Cafe. It's Culinary Outpost. It's a really nice outdoor cafe.
Okay, so this is Culinary Outpost in the Hard Rock Casino.
Yeah, and it's so on Wednesday night. We have all the details on the website. I'll put a link. But basically, if you can make it, we're trying to raise money for kids, for young people moving into the trades. Actually, I guess old people too if they want it. Yeah. But it'll be a fun event. You get to meet the editors and a lot of other great builders. And if you can't make it there, or if the tickets are sold out by the time you hear this, You can help support KeepCraft Alive by going to keepcraftalive.org/donate, and you can make a donation. You can buy one of our hats or T-shirts or a few other items that we have there that help.
You
support
meant to
the
say you
cause.
should.
You should. Definitely. Definitely. And if you buy a KeepCraft Alive T-shirt or hat, be sure to wear it on the job and
Wear it all the time.
Post some pictures on Instagram.
I think there's stickers too.
Cool.
You got a sticker on your car?
No.
I do.
I'm putting one on Matt's later.
Okay.
It'll come right off. My car's covered in salt.
Well, unfortunately, this is all the time we have today. Thanks to my other hosts, Robin, Matt, and Carrie, for joining us. And thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us wherever you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. So we mentioned that we're now on
We've
Spotify?
recently added to Spotify, and I think we'll hopefully soon be on iHeartRadio. We were only available for download on some of the core ones like iTunes and Google, and we want to just get the word out there. So if you like the podcast, find your local, your favorite way to listen to podcasts, and we should be there.
Cool. Thank you all. Happy building.